Hello everyone, my name is Ashton Gleckman, and today I am grateful to be joined by two excellent composers, Giona Ostinelli and Sonya Belousova. They've both worked together on the Romanoffs, and they've also worked together on projects like 2017's The Mist, films like Reprisal, and much more. Sonya has worked on many projects for the screen and is known for her incredible work with the award-winning project Player Piano. And Giona has scored over 30 feature films that have premiered at places like Sundance and Tribeca. Giona and Sonya, thank you guys so much for taking the time today.
Oh, thank you.
I'd love to begin by sort of diving into how you guys actually got started with music, sort of the beginning of both of your guys' musical journeys, and how that path sort of led to a career in media composition.
I'll start.
You go first.
It's more normal path, mine. So, yeah, otherwise there is a climb down after her story. Mine, I just started when I was very young. I started playing drums when I was 5. And then I started playing piano, but I was not virtuosi classical piano like her, more normal piano. And I went playing bands, many different bands like jazz, rock, all this. And I always been very fascinated by films and music in general. Like I remember trying to recreate scenes from films from like Indiana Jones and Back to the Future, so Star Wars with my Super 8 camera when I was a kid, failing successfully, but that was good. But I always loved music I loved music and storytelling and films, and so the best connection was doing music for films. And I grew up loving the scores of like Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, Romance in the Stone. So I always wanted to do that. I've never really been interested in doing music for like in a band or like this. I just really like it. So once I found out how to pursue this, I just left home and started pursuing that.
Well, for me, well, I was born in Russia. I grew up in Russia, so I've always been exposed to that great Russian classical education. So I started playing piano when I was 5. I made my debut at the St. Petersburg Philharmonic when I was 8. I think I started taking formal composition lessons when I was 10. I was already composing before, but formally I started when I was 10. I won my first international composition competition when I was 13. And then because of that, I was awarded with the Russian Ministry of Culture Award when I was 13. I was accepted to college when I was 15. And from there on, it's just, I've always been surrounded by music. It's always been music for me. As John, I always loved films. And so it was just a natural combination, music and films, because I love storytelling. And as much as I love writing concert music, like writing, operas and concertos, I was much more into storytelling and telling the story with the music. So again, music films was just a natural solution.
Do you remember one of the earliest influences you had in film scoring, one of the first film scores you heard where you were like, oh, that's what music can do for film?
I think same for me. I loved Romance in the Stone. I loved The Goonies. I loved Star Wars. I loved Indiana Jones. I loved Three Musketeers. I loved Robin Hood. I just recently rewatched Michael Kamen's Robin Hood.
Oh, extraordinary. Extraordinary.
Yeah, so incredible. I grew up with all of that. So,
So Sonya, you're from Russia and then you're from Switzerland. So how did your paths cross? And what's your collaborative sort of history been like? Why did you guys sort of begin writing together? And what is your guys' specific process?
So years ago, I was working on a film produced by David Mamet called 2-Bit Waltz, and it was requiring a very eclectic type of score.
Yeah, there was everything from like bluegrass to electropop to like jazz to virtuosic classical piano.
Right. So, since it was requiring like a virtuosic piano
cue. I just said.
Right. I play piano, but I'm no virtuoso, and I just don't like when people pretend to do something they're not. They're not. So, and I knew Sonya, I knew she was a phenomenal composer and virtuosic pianist. So I was like, would you mind doing together these cues that require this type of approach?
And I thought it was just going to be a one-time thing. And, I was curious. I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Let's try. And we started writing together. And what we realized is because our backgrounds are so completely different, me coming from Russia with all that, great Russian classical education, and John, being so exposed to a band's type of environment, when we combine all of that, we don't compete with each other, but instead we complement each other. So Like, for example, I would come up with an idea, and then Giona would extend this idea with something completely different that I wouldn't even think of otherwise, or vice versa. So in this case, we just inspire each other, and the final result is just so much more creative and beneficial.
Yeah, because from that and from the piano cues, it bled into like all the other cues. We started, working together on those cues, and then from there, each project we just kept working.
Yeah, we had such a great experience working together on 2-beat waltz, and we realized that we complement each other very well, and from there on, it just kind of kept going.
So you guys have worked on a large plethora of projects together, but I just want to jump directly up to the Romanovs. It was created by the people that created this little show called Mad Men. Little. And so, this showrunner and, the world that the people that created Mad Men created are so known for their ability to create drama, their incredible writing, their ability to just pick the perfect cast and really create its own distinct world. And the Romanovs is no different. It has a diverse set of musical possibilities. There's lots of intrigue, drama. How did you both approach diving into this incredible world?
Well, we experienced an interest in this show, I think, a year ago, because, the Romanovs, me being Russian, hello, I had to be involved. So, and then when they entered post, we received a phone call from Matthew that he wanted to meet with us. So we met, we sat down, we talked, and we realized that we click very well because we're both extreme workaholics. We're extreme perfectionists. So our work ethics matches just 100%. And
he has huge love. He has great appreciation. He's,
for music.
For music in general. He has a great ear, like
he
really
has a
good
wonderful ear.
Yeah, he hears things that other people don't hear. You're like, how do you? It's amazing.
He's very, very specific in what he's looking for, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and he loves Russian music and classical music. So, we click 100%.
So right off of that, during your guys' spotting session with the showrunner, did he give you a lot of different sort of examples of certain Russian sort of repertoire that he was thinking of for certain moments, or what was the spotting like with him?
It was different from episode to episode. Like, for example, for episode 3, House of Special Purpose, we did have like a formal type of spotting session when we sat down. We went through the whole film. I'm gonna call it film because it's 90 minutes long. We went for the whole thing, and he was very specific in terms of what he's looking for. With episode 8, the season finale, the one that holds everything, that was completely different because we didn't even have a spotting session at all. So what happened on that episode, because he was away, he was traveling, and the episode was ready way in advance. So we actually met with the editor and the producers. We sat down and we kind of went through an episode. And then we just started writing. So the first time Matt heard the music was without us even, having a spotting session or like talking between each other. Just heard the music. And for episode 8, he was like, "Yeah, I love it. Perfect. Can we move this? Can we move the dub mix? We're all set here."
We're all set.
Yeah, we all had a heart attack.
That's incredible. So going back to the Romanovs, because you guys did multiple episodes, I am curious, when you guys came back to do another episode, how much were you taking with you from your sonic palette from the last episode, and how much were you? 0. It was completely fresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because the point of that show is that, so we have 8 episodes total. Every episode is like a standalone movie. There is nothing connecting whatsoever. The only connecting thread is, it revolves around people who claim to be descendants of the Romanovs. That's really the only connecting element. Apart from that, it's, a different story, different genre, different cast, different locations, every single episode. So the point of that is that with those episodes being so different, the score also had to be completely different. And so the scores for episode 3 and episode 8 that we wrote, they're completely different. So they have 0 in common.
Even approach-wise, how we approach them. Because also episode 3, great thing because the time frame was really tight.
Yeah, for episode 3, we only had a week and a half from the spotting until the dub mix. So a week and a half to write, record, mix, deliver. That's quick.
And how many cues or how much music was in each episode generally? I know it was different for each, but
the ones that we scored, I think they had the most amount of music. I think we had around 25, 30 minutes per episode. For episode 3, the score overall was very, very eclectic. So we have big orchestral cues. We have very chamber intimate, fragile strings. We have very soloistic moments. Like, for example, in episode 3, we have a piano concerto, or we have a domra concerto. And domra is a traditional Russian folk instrument. So we have that.
And finding a domra player in Los Angeles who can record a concerto in 2 days, that was difficult.
We have hints of Hollywood Golden Age sound in episode 3. We have Russian influence
Electronic.
In episode 3. I'm
Some
getting
electron.
there.
Oh.
And we have a lot of electronic cues, which are also very elaborate. So episode 3 has the huge, music range. Episode 8, on the other hand, is completely different. The title of the episode is the one that holds everything. So it's fun because the music concept for the episode, it's like the title itself. The whole episode basically derives out of a single music theme that holds everything musically. And this music theme appears in the very middle of the episode. And so when we approached that episode, we spent a couple of days writing that theme. And then once we found it and once we perfected it, we were able to go back and then plant hints of that theme in every single cue.
So during the process of scoring the show together, both of you guys, were you guys saying, oh, let's take this cue, let's take this cue? You're really good with the traditional music. You take that cue. What was the process like between you guys?
We work like if it's like a band. So we are in the studio together at the computer or at the piano together. Literally.
Now imagine, having an Italian and a Russian in the studio. Explosion.
Wow. Sounds fantastic.
Because we also have a lot of instruments, so we always like to record as we write.
And so for us, recording is an essential part of writing. So we're both in the studio the whole time writing everything together. So there's no division between like, okay, you're going to do this better or you're going to do this better. No, that's not how it works with us. So we're writing together all the time.
Yeah.
And you being a classical pianist, I'm curious, do you have a grand in there or using samples or what are you, because I mean, you must be very specific in terms of your piano sound.
How did you guess?
Trying to find a recording studio with a piano in Los Angeles that Sonya likes, it's a mission impossible. It's
Yes, correct. Because there used to be a studio in Los Angeles with the most amazing piano, but now it doesn't exist anymore. So now I'm piano-less. I'm in search. But no, it depends on the project. It depends on what kind of, if we have a piano in a project, in the score, it depends on what kind of piano sound we're looking for. Some project would require a more like upright piano type of sound. Like, for example, when we did The Mist, what we did is we spent before we started actually writing the music, we spent like a whole week with an upright piano. We pretty much dismantled the whole piano. And we plugged the strings. We bowed the strings. We plugged them with like coins and keys and like everything you can imagine. So we try to produce all the sounds possible out of the piano, but not the sounds that happen when you actually hit the keys, but all the other type of sounds.
Yeah, we create a lot of textures because then we brought it into the computer and we modified a lot and created a lot of textures, but all stemmed out from this piano recording.
From the upright piano.
Yeah.
Or for the Romanovs, yes, we recorded a beautiful grand piano with a beautiful sound. So depends on the project. Sometimes sample piano works better because we're very specific in our sounds, not just in terms of piano sounds, but sounds in general. And when we produce mock-ups, it's basically a 99% of how it's going to sound as a final product. Like with the Romanovs, for example, because we have a lot of instruments here in the studio, a lot of the instruments were already recorded here, so that at the end we just had to record the orchestra and the soloists.
Yeah, the string orchestra.
The string orchestra and the soloists. So
you do some soloists beforehand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Some were done here. Yeah. The Romanovs was done all over the place.
Yeah.
So we're very specific in our sounds. So depends on the project.
So when you go into a project, do you like to sort of create? I know some composers like to create like an arsenal of custom contact instruments. Do you guys usually create sort of custom NKIs and stuff that you guys use throughout the scoring process?
We do, and we change from project to project. Like with The Mist, we created a lot of like contact instrument and custom libraries and all of that. Now we kind of deviating from that a bit, and we're preferring to each time recording live. And no?
Well, again, depends on the project.
It depends on the project.
Let's take something like Mist. Yes, with the Mist, we had a lot of contact instruments. We recorded a lot of these piano sounds. We recorded a lot of other sounds. Then we all sampled those sounds, and that was the core of that score, especially for the Mist character. With the Romanovs, a lot of that, we didn't really create custom contacts. We just recorded a lot of it in the studio. Same, for example, for Sacred Lies. A lot of that was recorded. So it really depends. In general, we love creating sounds because we love, customizing these sounds and having them very specific and tailored for our needs specifically, because otherwise, just having sounds available for everyone, that's not that cool because they're available for everyone. So
It depends from the, depends on the purpose, what the sound is gonna create, is gonna do. If it's something that is gonna be transformed into like a pad or a texture, sure, let's put it into contact, and it's gonna work from cue to cue. If it's something very specific that is a bit more maybe virtuosic, or you play different notes, all this stuff, it's much easier to record it every time, re-edit it, and just make it good.
Yeah, or if we're talking about a more electronic type of score, we would create a lot of synth sounds from scratch, and then we would have the whole palette of those sounds available before we start scoring.
Yeah.
So really depends on the score. Everything.
In terms of synth, this is a sort of like a nerdy tech question. Do you guys use soft synths like on the computer, or sort of hardware synths?
We
or a
usually
mixture?
No, you usually try to do like hardware synths, but I don't think it really matters.
Well, it's a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both. I don't think it really matters nowadays anymore what you're using, as long as it sounds good. You make it sound good. Like some people keep saying, "Oh, hardware is so bad." I'm like, you cannot really notice. Like, it's always fun. Maybe some people are like, "Oh, sounds so good." What what did you use? And you're like, "Oh, it was a synth. I mean, a soft synth." They're like, "Oh," and other times like, "This is amazing." You're like, "Oh, it was a hardware one." So it
depends. Yeah,
it really depends.
It's always a combination.
Yeah. So looking at these past projects of you guys over the past sort of few years, I mean, you have The Mist, and then you have Sacred Lies, and then you have this show. You guys are exploring all these different sort of kinds of projects. Is this something that you personally look for? Different kinds of projects with different themes and different possibilities musically?
Absolutely, absolutely. For every single project, we always try to create something new and explore something new and interesting.
To keep us interested and to keep us excited.
Yeah, but also like we don't really want to repeat ourselves. So like for example, from The Mist, which is such an experimental score, then diving into something like MFA, where what we did is we sampled Francesca Eastwood's vocals, well, not even vocals, her lines from the production dialogue. We sampled those phrases and then applied a lot of plugins, distortion to it, reversed. We did a lot of different modifications, and that basically became the core of the sound for her character. Or, Sacred Lies, where we wrote both the score and the songs and the lyrics for the songs, and I sang the songs.
Wow.
So that's something completely different. Like working on Sacred Lies was basically like producing an album, because that was the whole approach. It was less of like writing a score, but more like, producing the whole album. Or the Romanovs, which is very classical and very sophisticated, very orchestral. So that's literally what we're looking for. We're looking for diversity and, being able to experiment and do something completely different from project to project.
So looking at it, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'm saying also comes from us, because, this project could have been approached very differently musically. It's also you as a composer that you want to like.
That's very true.
You want to do something different each time. And you're like, oh, I want to experiment and keep interested.
So going into a project, let's just go ahead and use Sacred Lies as sort of an example. Just look at something different. Going into the project, how commonly are you guys sketching out thematic ideas? Do you guys write suites for certain characters or events? How do you guys approach that?
Okay, you start.
Well, with Sacred Lies, we actually wrote like 10, 15 minutes of music ahead. 15 minutes of music, of music ideas before they even went shooting. And that was basically the whole basics of the score. Then we build on top of
overall,
that.
We love writing from early on. We love writing from the scripts. We love, writing, being inspired from our initial conversations with either a director or a showrunner, because in this case, we get to direct the journey. Obviously, when we get the picture, all these elements are so important. The picture itself, the lighting, the acting, how this environment is created where the story unfolds. But writing from the script is great, because in this case, you get a chance to experiment.
And you're not typing to the pace of the picture, oh, there is a cut, you have to, change something. You just get wild with the ideas and explore the ideas. And then when you get to picture, you already have the music palette, the music ideas. It's more about arranging these ideas around.
Yeah, so with Sacred Lies, when we started this project, before they even started shooting, we had conversations with Rael Tucker, the showrunner. And based on these conversations, we wrote about 15 minutes of music, which explored different thematic elements of the show. And that literally became the core of that sound for the series. And then when we dived into actual, writing for the series, that music, those music elements were already established.
Which is also great doing this way, because then you give these music ideas to the editors, and instead of them trying to put music from other stuff for temping for them to editing, they're using your original music already for the show with the correct tone for it. And
they love it because, in this case, they get inspired editing the series with original music. And in general, we love starting early. Like, for example, with The Mist, we were on board from the very, very, very first editor's cut. So I think we wrote over 10 hours of music for the show.
Yeah. And
yeah,
we did.
All because, every editor's cut, there were a lot of editor's cut, there was a lot of director's cut. So, like, with every cut, you have to do certain modifications. Then some scenes are out, new scenes are in. So
some scenes went from one episode to another episode. So, it was a big puzzle to try to solve it.
With Sacred Lies, like songs-wise, for example, because we did talk to Rael about including female vocals and female voices into the score. So we started with that, and then as the score was progressing and developing, we felt like it needed more and more songs type of approach, but not like songs, but more like score type of songs. So we just kind of went for it, and we wrote a song, and we wrote the lyrics. And when Rael heard it for the first time, she was like, I did not expect that. She had to rewatch it again, and then she was like, I fucking love it.
It took a little while, yeah, of course. So we've talked a bit about your guys' process, conceptualizing ideas, actually executing them, your collaborative process. And I want to dive into sort of the last step in the process, which is a bit of an interesting one because some composers like to sort of step away from it. Some composers like to get very involved in it. And in the case of the dub stage, where you essentially go and you decide, it essentially decides the mix of the final result of the show. And some composers like James Newton Howard like to say, I wrote the score, take it to the dub stage. I know it's going to be screwed with, and I don't want to be there to see the destruction. Some composers like Hans are like, I need to be there because I need to see whatever they're doing. What is your guys' process with the dub stage? Do you like to be there? And
we like to be there.
We're very involved when it comes to the dub stage because we feel like dub stage is just such an essential, part of the whole process. So I don't think, completing the score means, recording and delivering it. No, dub stage is definitely a part of it. So we're definitely involved.
There's so many things that
can go right or wrong at the dub stage, and being there is incredibly helpful.
Well, yeah, because you wrote the score. No one else knows it better than you. Not even the music editor. So you can give ideas on how to solve some issues or problems that no one else can. And I think it's always helpful. And, being there as a collaborative person to the showrunner, director, and with the producers, trying to get the best product, I think it's always...
Yeah, because the dub stage that's the moment when everything comes together, the whole sound. So to me, I think it's essential.
Like the bells in Romanovs.
Oh my God, so okay, for the Romanovs. So we're at the dub stage of the Romanovs. We're like, everything is already great. Matt had a comment in one scene in episode 8 of adding the church bells.
And we already watched this. We
already went through everything times. Like 50 times. But now we want to add the bells. So, okay, they're adding the bells. And then suddenly they play this scene, and the scene sounds incredibly ominous.
It's a wedding scene. It's a wedding scene, so it's a celebration.
It's a wedding
It's nice,
scene.
Right? Nothing.
And then suddenly it starts sounding very dark and ominous, and everyone was like, what's going on? And I'm like, okay, guys, you have the cue in D flat major, and then you edit the bells that's play on E.
Oh, a semitone.
Yep, so you have that very cringing, ominous sound. I'm like, okay,
that's
guys, you
minor third. Oh, geez.
You have to pitch shift the bells from E to F. So, like, for example, these are the moments that if you're not there, no one else will know that. So what were they going to do? Just going to, bring down the music because of conflict. They wouldn't think of pitch shifting the bells, so the bells would be in the same key as the cue. So I think it's very important being at the dub stage.
Yeah, and then also, when, there are... there are situations where maybe you think, the queue is too busy or not too busy, and, working with the stamps and being there, it's always...
When are those situations?
Well, sometimes it happens.
How many times?
Well, not that often. Sometimes it happens.
Okay, I would disregard everything Giona said right now. Because the way we work, by the time we get to the dub stage, we try to give as many passes to the music as possible. Like in case of the Romanovs, we met with Matthew quite a few times to go through the score, to, make adjustments. He would give us his ideas and thoughts, and we would make adjustments based on that. So by the time we get to the dub stage, the score has, like we showed him the score so many times so that he knows it, he feels comfortable with it. So if there are any adjustments, they're very, very, very minor.
Yeah.
Like we've never had a situation that, we show up at the dub stage and we suddenly have something major. Not our.
Yeah.
So the amount of sort of work, the amount of revisions, being sent to new cut at midnight and then having to stay up to do this, and like the craziness of working on a show, the fact that you guys sort of got to the finish line is a triumph in and of itself. But once you've finished it all, you've returned the final thing, you've gone to the dub stage, you've said goodbye to your crew, and the thing actually comes out. Do you go back and do you watch it, or does it just bring back too many memories, or what's the process like for you after it's done?
You like rewatching?
Oh, I like rewatching. Oh, with Romanovs we watched a lot because we also had the premiere and then we had screenings here in Los Angeles, so we got to watch this episode quite a few times after it was done. But in general, I like rewatching. Giona doesn't.
No, I'm just always afraid something last minute, went wrong. So no, but.
No, but when you go to the dub stage, nothing goes wrong. So, when you're at the dub stage, this is how it's going to be. So you have control over that.
I'm starting to enjoy rewatching things. So.
Yeah, I like rewatching. I think it's cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure that in a couple of years, once a lot of time has gone by, you guys have worked on more projects, going back and rewatching it will be that the more interesting because it's not as fresh and right off the skillet.
Well, one thing you said before about deadlines and everything on the Romanovs is so funny. There was one cue in episode 3, the Domra Concerto, that we had the meeting with Matthew at 9 a.m. and we wrote that cue at between 1 and 5 a.m.
Yeah, there was a moment. So there was this scene when Christina Hendricks' character, she exits the hotel, and every single time in the episode when this scene reoccurs, the music theme also reoccurs together with the scene. So for that scene, we wrote a Domra concerto, and Domra is a traditional Russian folk instrument. It's basically like a Russian version of a mandolin or a lute. So we wrote that Domra concerto, which was completely done overnight. And because this theme reoccurs every single time the scene reoccurs, and it had to develop every single time it comes back. So it's basically, a Domra concerto plus 5 different variations of it. Yeah, that was done overnight. And then at 9 a.m. we had a meeting with Matthew to show him the piece, and it was hilarious.
We
and
still liked it at 9 a.m.
No, we still loved it. And then the best part after that was looking for a Domra player in Los Angeles. No.
Yeah, that
was impossible.
I have heard ridiculous stories about like there being a meeting in 10 minutes and somebody trying to rewrite the cue while the person's walking in, and then it's pretty hectic stuff, but.
Well, I'll tell you this. When we did episode 3, because for episode 3 we had such a crazy timeline, it was a week and a half. So when we had a recording session, because the night before the recording session, we had a meeting with Matthew, and he had some last minute comments, and we still had to do adjustments overnight. And then next afternoon we had a recording session. So I was finishing the scores in the car while driving to the recording session.
Yeah.
So listening to both of your guys' journey, it's just absolutely interesting because both of you come from different backgrounds, but both of you have accomplished so much already in your life, and there's already so much left to do, so many scores to write, and it's super exciting hearing about what you guys have been doing thus far. So 2 people out there who want to get involved with film scoring and media composition, who are like, I want to be doing what John Williams is doing, I want to be doing what Sonya and Giona are doing. What would you recommend to them in terms of a general scope of the whole entire industry? What do you recommend as your sort of one tip for aspiring composers?
Well, I would say, first of all, don't do what John Williams is doing because there's already John Williams doing that. Or don't do what Hans Zimmer is doing because there's already Hans Zimmer is doing that. Find something which is your own, which distinguishes you as a composer from everyone else out there. Apart from that,
I think it's always a very interesting question because I think everybody has different answer because I don't think there is just a way how to do it. Like you see, there are so many different ways how people enter.
Yeah, I don't think there's like step 1, do this, step 2, do this. Overall, create your own opportunities and get involved into as many projects as you possibly can. If you're a student, score as many student films as you possibly can because you never know where this relationship will take you.
Yeah, and always try to be, I think, unique and different because no one else wants to hear something that's already been done. You always, even though they say it, but when they hear something different, they're like, "Oh, this is different," and they have the raised eyebrow.
Yeah. So when someone wants to hire John Williams, they're gonna go and hire John Williams. So be you, And that's why people will want to hire you, because you are different, you are unique, and you are yourself. So be yourself.
Yeah, and doesn't mean like, reinventing the wheel every time, but having.
Sometimes it does.
No, I mean, no, but it's like, you can always do something slightly original, slightly different, that it's going to become your voice, your tone, and people are going to start noticing. And I think it's cool.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, just get involved into it, as many things as you possibly can. Don't be afraid of rejection, because there will be a lot of rejections along the way, and that's okay. And it's just a part of the process. So be prepared for that. Get every single time, get up and keep going.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the Russian style.
Yeah, Giona Ostinelli and Sonya Belousova, thank you guys so much for taking the time. Fantastic hearing about everything you guys are working on, and I really, really cannot wait to see what you guys do next. It's fantastic.